Good afternoon and welcome to Vote Chat, brought to you by the University of Otago Politics Department. We're live streaming this, recording it from the university's media production studio. So welcome to those in the audience that have joined us, and welcome to those watching on the live stream on the New Zealand Herald website or the university website. We're also doing this on Twitter, so Liam, tell us about that.
Thanks, Bryce. I'll be live tweeting the conversation today between Conservative Party leader Colin Craig and Bryce, so you can follow along, ask questions or make comments through our hashtag VoteChat14 or through our Twitter handle OUVoteChat. That's the way you can engage today with us. Okay, great. So, of course, normally we have MPs coming along to these sessions, but not just MPs aren't the only politicians around. There's other people that are aspiring to be MPs, and so I think it's really fantastic that today we've got one campaigning politician who could make a real difference if he and his party get into Parliament, Colin Craig from the Conservative Party. So
thanks,
welcome,
Bryce.
Colin.
Good to be here.
Okay, the big issue of the day is Maurice Williamson and his resignation yesterday. I just wondered what you made of this. What was your reaction?
Well, first of all, I mean, resignation as a minister.
Yes.
So he's still in Parliament. He's still saying he's campaigning this coming election and he's determined to win his seat.
So you would have preferred if he had announced his resignation from Parliament
Well,
yesterday?
I mean, let's face it, Pakuranga is a good electorate for us. We have a very good on-the-ground team there. And certainly I think this will help us get more support out of that electorate this election.
So you might stand?
Never rule it out. I mean, I think there's more to come out in the story. You know, if Maurice re-stands, I think it's a different formula than if he was to resign from Parliament. And so, look, it's something we keep our eyes open on. I mean, we haven't decided where I will stand. We have some key people, and it'll be allocating where they stand is going to be quite an important task for us. But this is relevant to those choices. Yeah,
so when are you going to decide? You know, when people want to know,
you know, they do. And look, I set myself really the end of May, and I think I'm on track for that.
Oh, wow, okay.
But that doesn't guarantee it'll be then. I mean, anything can happen in politics. And I think that's what makes it so interesting is who knew this was going to happen 48 hours ago?
Everyone's assumed that you're going to stand on East Coast base.
There are a lot of assumptions out there, yeah.
But why wouldn't you? I mean, it seems...
Well, it's my local area, and I think that's one reason to say that that is a good place to stand. I didn't stand there last time. I stood in Rodney, which is also somewhere that I've lived and have a lot of association with. And then there's a new electorate, which is not far from where I live either, called Upper Harbour. So in that area, in the matrix between those three electorates, is a huge support base for us. So we've got most of our votes last election, and so I think we've got to take that seriously. What
about Pakuranga, though? Does it feel right to you?
Well, the thing is, I did grow up in Pakuranga, played cricket for Pakuranga Cricket Club. My dad taught at Pakuranga College, so it's an area that I know well. My brother lives there, so it's not an unknown area for me.
Do you think it's an electorate that could vote Conservative, though? I mean, of course, you know, Maurice Williamson's talked about the big gay rainbow over it. Does that maybe...
He did, and that's hurt him in that electorate because it's a very conservative electorate.
Oh, really?
Yeah, look, it's one of the top 10, according to us, in terms of conservative city electorates in New Zealand.
But Williamson himself is seen as a Liberal. So, I mean, yeah, what do you think of Williamson as a politician? Is he someone you admire, or...?
Well, look, I think he's made, along the way, a few mistakes. One of the things we picked him up on was when he said, I don't care if people marry their dog as long as they don't do it on my front lawn.
Yeah.
Now, in his electorate, I think people had a wee bit more regard for the institution of marriage than that. And that offended a lot of his supporters and a lot of people in the electorate. So I think he's someone we see as probably a bit more outspoken and prone to make a few more errors. And for us, we know that we're picking up a lot of our support off National. So, yeah, this is interesting news for us, and we'll be keeping our eye on what happens next.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think he did the right thing yesterday in resigning? Did he have to?
I don't think the PM was giving him any choice, actually. John Key straight away was saying, look, this is a mistake. It's a judgmental error.
Yeah.
I think he was very clear about it, and I don't think there was really any option for Maurice Williamson but to resign.
So what about on the question of him standing again? I mean, John Key has come out and said it's up to Maurice to decide, which seems like a signal almost saying that he doesn't have complete confidence in him standing again.
I don't know whether that's a signal or not. What I do know is what's happened so far does increase the vote for us in that electorate, and anything further, if he stands down or if there's anything further that comes out around the issue of, meddling in a police investigation.
Yeah.
That's all good for us.
I mean, he's been tarnished, so that would help your chances of running in the election. And
it raises our party vote, and for us, the party vote is what matters here. And so we know that we're likely to get more votes out of Pakuranga.
So would you prefer to be running against the tarnished Morris Williamson in Pakuranga or a new unknown candidate?
Oh, well, I haven't thought about that, you see. Now, that's a challenging question. And the answer is, I think name recognition is very big in politics.
Yeah, of course.
And I think someone new and unknown actually would still be weaker than someone who's made a couple of mistakes.
An unknown candidate might be a chance for National to sort of wink, wink, Colin's our man.
Well, I don't decide what National does, but I think everyone understands from the fact that John Key started the year by saying he could work with us. I think there's a reasonable expectation that National will try and make sure that we're in Parliament if there's any doubt about us crossing the threshold.
Just about Christine Rankin, so she hasn't got dibs on Upper Harbour then? I just assumed that she was going to be the candidate.
Yeah, look, we're doing a candidate process right now, so we haven't made decisions around who our candidates are going to be. Certainly, she as the CEO of the party is not that keen to sort of split her duties between being a candidate and CEO. Having said that, she's the highest polling person when it comes to local body elections for Upper Harbour and very, very much like.
So, thinking more broadly about the Conservative Party, I mean, if you do get into Parliament, if you hit that 5% threshold or you get an exemption by winning a seat, there's going to be, a number of new MPs coming in that we've never heard of. Who are these people going to be?
It's true. Well, obviously before we get into the election campaign proper, we'll be putting out our list that will say who our people are.
When will this be, do you think?
We don't have a set date on that.
Sure.
We've actually, next week, we're starting a list ranking discussion. And those are the most difficult discussions you have in politics because you've got to decide who goes ahead of who.
But there must be some obvious people that you're thinking, well, they might be in Parliament as well as Christine Rankin. There must be some.
We haven't got that far in terms of working out as a party. So I think we need to. The approach we take is sort of sequential. Let's get our candidates. Then, once we've got all of them, let's start working out where the list goes. I think preempting it and going, let's pick and choose a few people isn't the right process, and we've said to all our candidates that we'll stick to the process and go through it thoroughly, and they can have confidence at the end that it's a well-considered list.
Okay, so the name, the Conservative Party, there's other Conservative parties around the world, in the UK, Canada, etc.
Yeah.
Do you see similarities between your party and those parties?
Inevitably there is.
Yeah.
So if you look at the Conservative Party in Canada, they're very fiscally conservative, interested in making the economy work well. They pulled out of the Kyoto Agreement and said we'll focus on environmental issues locally that are good for Canada, but we don't want to harm our exporters. If you look at the UK, the Conservative Party there, they've done welfare reform. They've talked about making sure that jobs pay more than not working. They've even introduced, paid marriage counselling because they've taken the view it's cheaper to try and keep relationships together than to pay for them to break apart. So these are sort of common threads, and it's not surprising there are a lot of similarities because obviously we think conservatively.
Right. Now we're doing this on Twitter too, so Liam, any questions yet or any responses?
Yeah, there's been a question in regards to your comments about the list and who's going to stand for the Conservative Party. There's an impression that the Conservative Party is perhaps a one-man band. Is that true?
Well, no. Last election we had 52 candidates, and we are expecting this time to have a candidate in every electorate. So it'll be a lot of people and a big cross-section of New Zealanders standing in that. So I think obviously in this age where it's a little bit presidential politics now. Party leaders, even in the big parties, you don't get a lot of visibility on other people most of the time. So, and I'm the founder and started it, so I think it's obvious that I'm going to be mostly in the limelight at this stage, but we'll have other people that will contribute.
Is there any way in which the Conservative Party and Colin Craig are different, or is it entirely seamless,
obviously I'm very passionate about conservative values, conservative issues, and by that, when I explain conservatism to people, I say,
tell us.
If I ask you to conserve water, what will you do? You'll think, well, gee, water's important, so I won't waste it, and I'll make careful decisions. I'll start planning how I use my water. And I think that at the very core of conservatism is this idea that resources are actually limited, opportunities are limited, money's limited, let's be careful and make the very best weighed decisions around this.
I know that's a metaphor, but is it, but it's an ecological metaphor. Does that mean that you do have some sort of sympathies with the kind of principles of environmentalism?
Oh, well, personally, I'm very in the environmental space. And look, the party's not an exact alignment with everything that I think. That's not the way it is. You have to accept that there are other people and other viewpoints, and we go through a process with policy that consults all our members, and they get the opportunity to have input. And it ends up being a well-rounded discussion with input from a whole lot of other parties. So but I'm very committed to that cause. Conservatives are often summed up in the concept of, do you give a man a fish or do you teach him to fish? And the Conservatives in the space that says, let's teach someone to fish. And I am really in that firm believer and committed to those principles. I think they work.
Okay, so just on that environmental issue then, climate change, would the Conservative Party vote for legislation that seeks to, mitigate the effects of climate change?
Well, see, we're opposed to the emissions trading scheme. We think there's a tax, makes everybody pay more money.
Yeah.
But it hasn't done a thing to reduce our country's emissions.
So how would you reduce emissions?
So where we'd go is we'd say, how can we actually change the environment or improve the environment that we're in? Cleaning up our rivers, restoring our fisheries, which are depleting.
Yeah, that's all good, but
toxins in the environment.
Would that affect emissions, though?
No, but these are very real things that we can do. I think the emissions trading scheme, which has been sold to us as a, wow, we're going to set this example and magically overnight the US and China, who produce most of the emissions, are going to change their mind. I think it's pie in the sky. I don't think they're going to at all. But I think we could be doing something very genuine and very real that would have an impact on all New Zealanders if we looked a little bit closer to home instead of signing up to some airy-fairy tax scheme.
Okay. Now, the Conservative Party, you've talked about what conservatism is. Would you define yourself as a social conservative? Does that resonate with you?
I think I'm a social conservative. And look, really governments do two things in my view. They manage a whole lot of businesses and money.
Yeah.
And they make laws about what's right and wrong in society. And so, I'm conservative. I think the money needs to be carefully managed. I think we should balance the budget. I actually think that should be the norm, not borrowing. And when it comes to social issues, making laws about what's right and wrong, I'm definitely more conservative. I'm a reasonably what people would call a hardliner in terms of law and order. And I'm not big on social change. I wouldn't agree with redefining marriage, for example.
Right. So
that kind of...
Politics is too liberal at the moment, socially.
Well, look, I think economically and socially there have been some changes that I disagree with, and that motivated me in part to form a party and enter into politics.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the discussion about the Conservatives and Colin Craig has been more about the social issues, but the economics ones are pretty important too. So I just wondered...
For me, because my background is business economics, I lectured in economics and finance, so for me the economic space is the one that I'm more closely associated to.
It doesn't come through so much.
No, and the reason for that I think is that the media find the social debate more interesting, and if you look at the redefinition of marriage, nobody in Parliament really wanted to argue against it. So here was I, someone who's not in Parliament, who got a lot of television time because I was prepared to participate in the debate. And so I think the media have found a lack of politicians, generally speaking, who want to engage in conservative side of the social debate. Economically, however, there are a lot of people with their hands up, and it gives us less opportunity to comment on that. Okay,
that's interesting. So on the left-right spectrum, would you place yourself somewhere on it? Right-wing, centrist?
Well, some people look at our policies and go, oh, gee, that's a bit left-wing, and some right-wing. I love a quote, Ronald Reagan, who said, politics isn't about left and right, it's about up or down. And I see us very much in that space. We want to get employment up, we want to get the income of New Zealanders up, we want to get our exports up, we want New Zealand to be a country that's become more prosperous. And left-right, I don't think actually... I see politics as left-right, but I also see it as so liberal versus conservative.
Absolutely.
So we've seen liberal economic policies, for example, ideological ones, that says the market always gets it right, that I would disagree with, because as a conservative, I'm saying, no, you can't just do blind ideology. You've got to ask, is this the right move for us economically?
So this current government, how would you rate it, say, in terms of its economic management?
Yeah,
1 to 10, how would you...
Actually not well. I'd probably give them a 3 or a 4. I know they would say how wonderfully they've done, but they talk economic growth, but that growth's entirely funded by debt. You know, they have all these budgets, which they very optimistically been calling zero budgets, and they miss by billions of dollars. It's a game of smoke and mirrors. Our debt has gone from 10 billion to 50, and they're projecting 65 now.
So a Colin Craig government would slash spending more? I mean,
I think we have to track the spending down. I think that's necessary. Look, households in this country tighten their belt, reduce their debt. Businesses in this country, you know, reduce their spending, also reduce their debt. Government took a different approach and said, let's start borrowing big. And we've borrowed more money in less time than any government in the history of our country. And the long-term consequence of that will be, once again, that we have to turn around and sell stuff. Eventually, you run out of stuff to sell.
I think one of the interesting economic debates this year has been about the government in terms of its deals with Rio Tinto, with Sky City. How do you view those sort of economic arrangements?
Well, I've been outspoken on those and criticised them, because I don't think that's the way forward for us as a country, to make sort of backroom spot deals with someone just because at the moment it seems like the right thing to do. I mean, the Rio Tinto deal, you've got the Prime Minister saying we'll do it, but you've got Treasury saying don't. The Sky City deal, which was really decided before it even kicked off, had people putting in, you know, genuinely spending millions to make a good submission on it when they never had a chance. And I did a little bit of background investigation, because I happen to know a lot of people in property in Auckland, and we could have got a better deal if we wanted to. I mean, the Auditor General said that process, while not illegal, was not a good, robust process.
The government needs to take more account of Treasury advice? Is that what you would be?
I think so. Treasury is telling government right now that there is a debt trap that they're heading into, that they need to realign spending. Bill English said, oh, well, sometimes it's good and sometimes it's bad. But ultimately, this is good advice, and it should be listened to.
Okay. So superannuation is huge. You know, that's a big part of spending. Are you advocating cutting that? I mean, what about the age limit? You know, that's one of the big debates this year. What should it be? What's your party's policy?
Well, where we've got to start here, I think, is 2 things. Number one, whatever change we have to make, and we will have to, because every other country that's faced this same issue has been gearing the age upwards. We're going to have to do that at some stage. What I think we need to do, and where I disagree with John Key on this, is he said he won't even discuss it. Now, I think when a politician said, I'm not even going to talk about an issue, I think that's very closed-minded. It's head in the sand stuff. And I actually, while he's not prepared to change it, and I have to say we have sympathy with that view, nonetheless, refusing to have a discussion on something this significant, I think. But
you still need parties to be saying what age, you know, they'll have the entitlement at.
I think this is one of those issues where really getting a cross-party agreement shouldn't be that hard, because we all recognise it's not affordable in the long run.
So you do think it should go up from 65 to something higher?
Ultimately, it's going to have to. Okay. No one could argue against that. I mean, John Key won't talk about it, but the reality is if he did, he would have to acknowledge the economics are we have to make some changes.
Okay. What about on Twitter, Liam? Anything?
Yeah, there's been some really good reaction to this, and I think people really want to know, where are you going to cut the money from? Because you have to. If you're going to reduce spending, you're going to have to cut it from somewhere. So where are the top 3 cuts going to be?
Top 3? Yeah. Well, top 3, that's interesting. First of all, let's give an example of where I think cuts could occur. Education Department, Ministry of Education. Now, that doesn't teach anyone. Now has a high $800 million spend. It used to do the same function it does now with nearly the same population for about half of that.
Right.
I really think what we need to do is look at it and say we need more resources in the classroom, which is the front line teaching students. And I would halve that, go back to what we used to have in terms of a budget, take half of it, put it in the classroom to improve educational outcomes, which is what I would like to do, and save half of it. Now, that's the sort of thing I think we can change. The other thing that we can do, and I think we should be doing, is making more use of the resources that we do have. Now, we've given the green light to oil exploration in this country, and we are going to get an amazing 6% of profit, which frankly is abysmal. It's our resource. And I would look at that and go, why don't we look at a country like Norway, who have similar country, similar level of resources to us, who are now incredibly wealthy, prosperous, barely hurt by the global financial crisis. Why? Because they said, we're no longer going to let the British take the oil. Okay. We want to be participants in that process. We want joint ventures. We want our people having jobs. We want to be the beneficiary of the resources that we have. And I actually think that's something we have to do differently.
So the Conservatives are quite keen on the drilling, but want the regulation of it and the configurations of investment and
we have a wee bit of a concern in that the changes National have made are not quite consistent. They've put in some reasonable, I think reasonable, perhaps not far enough, safety measures around the oil, but they haven't covered exploration with that, which is a problem when you look at most of the mishaps happen during exploration. So I think they've not quite seen that correctly. But we do think we have to use our resources, not in a silly way. If you think about the fact that foreign corporations do a lot of it now, we could actually do less of it, but if it was New Zealand controlled for the benefit of New Zealanders, actually we could do less of it and still be wealthier.
Okay, now you've said some interesting things on education. I just wondered if I could talk a bit more about that. Charter schools, I'm assuming you're in favour.
Yeah, we are, but not ideologically. What bothers me is when people go into this sort of debate ideologically. Now, I've met people who go, oh no, charter schools should be out because it's wrong, and there are policies with that parties with that policy, you know, Greens, Labour and New Zealand First. And then I think there's another side which is ideologically saying, oh, this is what we've got to do because it creates some sort of competition or whatever it does. I know 3 of the 5 schools reasonably well. The Vanguard Military School, which is not far away from where I have my business, is a fantastic outfit. It actually, all the students that come into that are students who have failed in mainstream schooling. And they come into an environment where there's a focus on physical fitness, there's a focus on practical skills. 84% of them succeed. And I can't believe anyone whose attitude is, oh, we should just shut them down.
Sure.
These people have already failed in public school. I think it's worth giving them another go.
I'm getting a sense that you're probably not entirely confident on state mainstream schooling. I mean, you homeschool your own child, don't you? Is that right?
Yeah, and I don't talk a lot about my family, sure, but my wife was keen to give it a go, and you know I was keen enough. Yeah. I would.
But is that like a vote of no confidence in the current system, or?
No, it's not, and I would mainstream my daughter for exams because I think in terms of values for me that's pretty important. I mean, I lectured at a New Zealand university.
So
two parents as teachers, and both my sisters are teachers. So we're a very educationally involved family.
But tell us about your educational experiences then. So you went to University of Auckland. You're a student there.
I did. I actually went to Massey University as well, postgraduate studies. Okay. So I went there. I did a Bachelor of Commerce, started out doing a Bachelor of Science, changed to a Bachelor of Arts because I found history, politics and far more exciting. And I think...
Especially politics.
Of course, politics. I think I found myself a little bit at university. I was always a very successful student. I found studying easy, and I'll be honest, I was quite a lazy student. Loved the social life at university.
You're not a lazy person though, are you?
No, I'm not. No, I get up very early. I work really hard. I think success is probably 90% perspiration and 10% inspiration.
Okay.
So you do have to work hard, I think, to get places in life, and I do that.
Okay, so at university you cruised a bit, but...
I did because I think it was an opportunity to discover the world. I spent a lot of time doing my own research on things that interested me because there was this wonderful multi-storey library that just held information on so many subjects. And I loved that. I found that so exciting. Nowadays, of course, you'd look it all up on YouTube, but that wasn't that big back then. So that was for me was a wonderful experience. I made some of my lifelong friends through university. So yeah,
great,
wonderful experience.
Now we've got a question on Twitter about student allowances. Liam?
Yeah, so Colin, talking about getting students through university, do the Conservatives support a universal student allowance, and should uni fees stop rising? So they're two questions, but they're worth answering, I guess.
Yeah, they are, and I don't think they're easy questions to answer, because the reality is that we have so many more people going to universities nowadays that the cost of providing tertiary education is so substantially bigger than what it used to be. When I first went to university, in fact, I didn't have to pay fees. I mean, pay course fee of $40 or something to cover, you know, some photocopying or whatever it was. But the reality was, the number of students at university, it was so much less of a cost than it is now. And I do wonder about whether we've made the right choices by simply saying, let's get everybody going to university, because it's what's happened. The funding model is now bottoms on seats, which gets, you know, competition between universities, which didn't used to be the case. And I wonder whether we've now just taken the mass education approach. And the alternative argument is, well, you know, we've got to get people educated and ahead somehow, but I would suggest the better investment is to start when people are very young. I think we don't do prevention, we don't do early intervention well, and I think education is one of those areas where if we put a bit more in at the front end, we'd actually have a much better qualified, better able population. I do despair a little bit that we got rid of apprenticeship schemes and other ways of transitioning people into the workforce. If you look at it, 24% of 18 to 24-year-olds don't have a job and are not getting trained.
Right.
That's 1 in every 4 that's missing out. It's unacceptable.
We'll go back to Twitter. Anything else, Liam?
Yeah. Do the Conservatives have a youth program, like you've got the Young Nationals?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. We have Young Conservatives, and it's growing very quickly. Well, I think we've got...
Is that university-based?
Yeah, university-based, 4 campuses so far, and growing. So that's, for us, we've got a lot of young people now engaging. Partly like our style. And there are a lot of conservative young people at universities. It's not always obvious. I think the liberal voices on university campuses tend to be a little louder. And so people don't perceive that in every lecture theatre, in every meeting, in every gathering, there are people who are sitting there who are genuinely conservative. And I know there's this old thing, oh, you know, if you're not a liberal when you're 20, you've got no heart, and if you're not a conservative at 40, you've got no brain.
So does that speak to your life?
I don't think that holds.
Doesn't? So you were always a conservative?
Yeah, I think so. I think that certainly I always had the philosophy that said people need to be responsible for themselves. Taking responsibility is a good thing to do. And the whole thing of let's get people more able to look after themselves. Okay. I've never been someone who thought welfare was any sort of long-term solution for anyone.
Okay, so with personal responsibility being a theme, why would you ban something like synthetic cannabis then? I mean, isn't that personal responsibility to choose what sort of drugs you take?
Yeah, I think the issue there is you're talking about a balance of personal freedoms versus a cost to society. If we look at smoking, what we've said is we're going to tax the living daylights out of smoking, and we do, because we recognise there's a health cost associated with it. So you
would up the costs even more of cigarettes?
Not necessarily. I actually think that the tax now, on studies that I've seen, actually is about right. I know they're an easy target too, and I don't like just picking on easy targets. The same is true for alcohol. I mean, we did an enormous study, the best study we've ever done in this country. It was called Alcohol in Our Lives. Yeah. It should have been an eye-opener for everyone. Came up with policies that government should implement. They've implemented nearly none of them.
So what about increasing the tax on alcohol? Would Conservatives do that?
I think we have to. This is the recommendation of all the experts.
Small increase or huge increase?
Well, I think looking at what Australia have done, I think we should probably follow that. I don't think it makes any sense that beer in South Auckland, where the biggest problems are with this, is cheaper than water. I mean, that's incredible to me.
Okay.
But that's the way that it is. And I think we've got to see that while we respect people's choices, the thing is these choices impact themselves, their families and society.
Why not ban cigarettes or alcohol then, like you would synthetic drugs?
Well, I think there's a little bit of a difference in that, yeah, there are some long-term effects of smoking, but generally they're quite personal to the individual. I mean, we did, and I think rightly so, put some restrictions about smoking in public places where other people are affected. But I'm not really interested in widening the availability of psychoactive substances, particularly when it is a gamble. I mean, a lot of these are new substances, relatively untested, and I don't buy testing on animals. First of all, give them a break, the poor things. Secondly, for goodness sake, people are different from animals. We metabolise things differently. Sure. And I think it's very, very shallow to say that that's a way to make sure they're safe.
I'm assuming that you would see cannabis, real cannabis, as preferable to synthetic drugs. I mean, I think you've said in the past that you prefer for society than alcohol.
I believe it's less harmful, but that doesn't mean that I think we should make it legal. And the reason for that is that in the research I've seen and in practice where it has been legalised, you get two things. Number one, you do get a level of psychiatric, I think about 52% tends to be the average, of people that therefore need subsequent psychiatric treatment. They don't pay for that, we do.
Okay.
And secondly, it is a gateway drug. Now, it's not that for everybody, of course it's not. But I think we place limitations on our society where we see a perceived risk or cost in our society to others. And I actually subscribe to that philosophy. I think there's some things that wouldn't harm all the people that use them, but would harm enough of the people that use them that we put limitations. That's why we rate movies. That's why we actually reject some movies, some computer games altogether, because we perceive that there would be more harm achieved than the value in providing someone the opportunity to do it.
Okay. If I could just change tact a wee bit and talk about gender issues. Of course, you know, the thing that you're most famously known for this year is Russell Norman's allegation that you believe a woman's place is in the kitchen. And you've said it's not the case.
I think it's outrageous. I think it's outrageous to suggest that. And I think if I tried that with my wife, I'd get given a lot for very quickly.
Where is the place of women in New Zealand in 2014?
Well, I think that's a challenging question because I do not think it's the same for everybody, nor do I think it's actually my job to decide where women should be, frankly. I don't know why a politician would. I see modern society as being very challenging. And when you look at what we expect people to be able to do, I mean, they've got to manage complex financial situations, they've got to hold a job in a difficult environment, they're supposed to buy a house, well, that's getting harder and harder.
Yeah.
And you look at how you balance, for example, motherhood with work. I think the key here is flexibility. I think there's a need to be in different places at different times. And I think if we're going to get it right, what we need to be is supportive in each of the seasons of life.
Okay. Do you think women are discriminated in this society or face any sort of special inequalities?
I think what happens is in our society there are often, and in every way, people who don't necessarily judge people on merit, and I think that's sad. And so, yeah, there are situations where I think that occurs.
So on a policy level, like issues of pay equity, you know, would the Conservatives vote in favour of legislation to deal with pay equity?
You know, I don't think we'd see it as a legislative issue. I think this is about a society growing up. I'm very much in the space that says people should be rewarded on merit. I think that's the right way to judge it. And certainly that's the principle that I employ in my business, and I am an employer of 25 people. So I think for me, that's the right way forward. So value people by what they contribute and what they do.
Yeah. Now, what about the same-sex relationship issue? And of course, Russell Norman has said that you believe more stuff that you've refuted. So, what is the place of gay men and women in New Zealand society at the moment? What should it be?
Yeah, well, look, again, I'm not sure why it would be my job to decide where their place should be. I don't think it is. I think for all New Zealanders, regardless of whatever choices they make in life, I think it's about them finding where they contribute best.
Okay, but on a policy issue,
so I wouldn't be trying to policy or have legislation put anyone anywhere.
There are questions that come up in Parliament if you're there, or if you'd been there, say in 1986 for the homosexual law reform. How would you have voted?
Well, these are issues that we believe should go to the people of New Zealand. If we're changing a major institution, as we have done recently, of marriage, I think that should have gone to the people of New Zealand. I personally didn't think it should change. I was quite happy to state that. I didn't think that we should change the adoption laws either. That was my view, that's where I stood, and I was quite happy to represent New Zealanders on that. So what my preference would be that people would decide on this rather than politicians.
There's been some pretty high-level politicians that call themselves Conservatives, David Cameron, the Conservative Party leader, who voted in favour of all sorts of liberal things. Are they still Conservatives?
To my view, they're compromised. And I think you see this in the support base. What's happened in the UK is that the Conservative Party have lost a lot of ground to the UK Independence Party. And actually, when I look at it, while we have some policies in common with the Conservatives, we actually have a number of policies in common with what's called UKIP. Again, I mean, I would look at our own situation here. You had John Key, who represents Helensville, which is a Conservative electorate that did not want to change what marriage was, and he goes to Parliament, and previously he voted against civil unions. Well, I thought civil unions made sense. He voted against that because he said that his electorate were Conservative. This time round, he ignored his electorate and voted purely for himself. I don't think in a good democracy people think that way. I think he got it right the first time when he voted inconsistently in respect of what his electorate wanted. And I think that's what democracy is about. We've
got a question on Twitter or a response. What's that, Liam?
It's been a really interesting conversation today, Colin. I think, and I'm confused as well, there's a lot of conversation from you about personal responsibility and people being responsible for their own choices and destinies, yet you seem quite keen on reducing what they can and cannot choose, for instance, gay marriage and things like that. How do you reconcile personal responsibility with a conservative view of government?
Well, look, I don't see any conflict there. I think asking people to be responsible for themselves is the right thing to do, and I think that goes across all walks of life. We do talk about compassionate conservatism, and we should get to that. But I think the issue of changing what we are as a society or giving people more permissions within our society does need to be carefully measured, because not everything is about personal freedoms. It's about weighing those against what impact that has on others. And I take that very seriously. I'm not a libertarian. A libertarian believes everyone should be able to do what they want to do. I'm a conservative. I think that people will have to work within limits. I do believe in laws. I do believe in balancing what an individual might wish to do against the good of society. And the classic example always given is whether or not we should legislate on seatbelts. Now, we do. And when you think about it, come on, aren't we growing up enough to decide whether we should wear a seatbelt or not? But the reality is, if you don't wear a seatbelt, you're far more likely to do a serious injury, which we will all be paying for.
Okay.
So a libertarian would say, no, don't legislate on seatbelts. I would say there is actually a reason to do that. It's not putting a major imposition or a cost on people to do so.
Okay. Now, of course, we've got 5 months now till the election, so I just wanted to end with a few questions, a bit of discussion on the election and perhaps its outcome. Isn't there a danger that you could be responsible for ending the National Government's time in office? You could either cannibalise the National Party's vote and make them fall short, or you might scare off some of the more liberal supporters of National from voting for National. And isn't there a danger that you will be the end of the National Government?
But this is politics. This is about winning as many supporters as you can. And we are taking a lot of support away from National. We know that. National knows that. I take the view that's what it's about. We are winning supporters. It's not our job in any way, shape or form to try to prolong a national government. We agree with them on some things. We could support them on some things. But we are greatly opposed to some other things that they've done. So for me, it's not about me having any responsibility to National. I'm not beholden to them, and we're not the National Party. But nonetheless,
there might be people who come back after September 20 and blame you for a Labour Greens government coming in. Are you happy with that? Will you be able to respond to those
Well,
people?
my response to that, if we take that much vote away from national, then we're still going to be in a position to decide who's the next government, and that will make us part of the discussions, which is what we aim to be.
So the 5% is still where you're aiming in terms of your entry point to Parliament?
Absolutely, and I think Winston Peters made a comment here on your last one that he was at 1.5% and no one thought he could get into Parliament. But the thing is, as a small party, we know our support's going to go up. We got nearly 3% last time. So, yeah, we're aiming for the 5 and think we can do better.
Where's it going to come from? I'm still not convinced that you're going to be able to get from 2.5 or whatever you are up to that 5. It's still a big gap.
Yeah, well,
how's it going to happen?
I know how sceptical you are, Bryce, because you didn't think New Zealand First could get from 1.5 to 7, but they did. Look, where it comes from, about half of our support transfers across from national. And then the balance from there comes from either New Zealand First or Labour, mostly. We get a few people across from the Greens, not too many. I know of 2. But yeah. And amongst over 6,000, that's probably not great statistics. But the reality is we have people joining up every day. We're a growing party, and we're very strong at grassroots, and I believe that will convert to votes. Okay,
well, I won't do any bets with you because I lost the last one with Mr. Peters. I'm assuming you're not a gambling man, and that might get me off the hook.
Not hugely. No, it might get you off the hook if I wasn't,
yeah, but anyhow, I do wonder about some predictions, you know. Regardless of how the Conservatives do you think National's going to get back in? And what sort of percentage of vote do you think they're going to end up with?
Well, I think they'll be far and away the most supported party.
Sure.
I don't believe they'll get 47, 48% again. I think that'll drop. I think we'll get a significant slice of that, but not all of it. I think if National, and John Key's shown himself pretty good at this, if they do the numbers and stack the deck, they'll have enough to form the next government.
Okay, and Labour, I mean, they're struggling at the moment to stay above 30%.
Yeah, look, I don't know David Cunliffe very well. I knew David Shearer, and I thought he was an excellent bloke, actually, and very much a moderate. Problem he had was that I think he and John Key sat in pretty much a similar space in terms of appeal to the electorate. But yeah, look, they've got 1 or 2 problems, haven't they?
Okay, so I think the big question is Winston and New Zealand First.
Yeah.
Will they be back in? And yeah, that's the first question, I guess.
I think most people perceive that there's a lot of similarities between us and New Zealand First. And there's crossover in policy. I think there are some significant differences, certainly in political approach. I mean, Winston Peters, it's old school, first past the post. In an interview, he'll pretty much tell you the questions that you should be asking, whereas I will answer the questions that you ask, because I actually think that's the style that I think we need, much more honest, genuine, open and transparent.
You're saying that New Zealand First and the Conservatives, the main difference is of style rather than substance?
Yeah, style's very significant. There are some differences in policy. If we look at charter schools, okay, we're different there. We think that if they work, then they're entitled to be there. They think they shouldn't be there. He thinks we should buy all the assets back. I think financially he's dreaming. There are differences between us, but there's a lot of common ground. I think long term, here's a prediction, I think long term there won't be enough room for both of us, and I think we'll take that space.
I think you're entirely right about you probably can't both mutually exist, but do you think you can both be in Parliament after 20 September?
I actually think that's probably quite likely.
Okay, and will we be able to work with them in government potentially?
I think so. We could work with anyone on issues where we agree. Okay. I think for me, that's the key of MMP. Surely we should be about building consensus and finding areas we can agree on.
Could you be a minister in government after?
As long as it did not require me losing the right to vote the way that we promised the electorate we would vote. I'm not prepared to give a blank cheque and then go against the promises we've made for the things we would campaign for.
Okay, well that's fantastic, Colin, and we'll come back after 20 September and see how your predictions fared.
Fantastic.
Okay,
thank you.
And thanks everyone for coming along.
Thank you.